Hello and welcome to the first of many videos with me, Ryan. Hopefully these videos will give you a helping hand through your CCENT journey and ultimately your career. For those who don't know, you can contact me here on YouTube, on LinkedIn or Twitter. What I would like to spend a few moments talking about is the agenda for this video. First, I want to jump in and having a look around the advice and tips that I can give you and what I use to achieve my certifications. I want to touch base on 3 components for success with technologies, and we'll get into what I actually mean by that a bit later in this video. I've put together a plan of attack for the CCENT, so what sort of topics we're going to cover and what order. And then at the end we're going to finish with some recommended material, whether that's third party or with Cisco directly, and then we'll have a discussion around lab equipment, whether that's virtualized or physical. So first of all, we're going to talk about how you would start this journey. It's important that you as an individual have a plan. Maybe that plan has a deadline, maybe it doesn't. It depends on your situation. So for example, I never set a deadline for when I study because I'm persistent enough to ensure that I will eventually get it. I try not to sell it for 2, 3, 4 months in advance, otherwise I'll just stress myself out over it. However, some people need that focus and need that timeline. In fact, most people do. So it's important that you sit down and you plan your journey and maybe put some time allocated against each section of the course. It's important to really have a look at yourself and think this won't happen overnight. I see a lot of people jump in both feet, go for a few days and then wear themselves out. The CCENT and most vendor certificates really is about the endurance and understanding the technologies at a fundamental layer and being persistent. Once you finish a technology, you will forget elements of that. It's just human nature. It's about persistence and going back and going over your notes and making sure that you really understood it. Talking about notes, resource is a key element. Don't expect to watch one video series or read a single book and to pass the exam. Rarely is all that information going to be in a single source. It's important to spread out and ensure you understand it. Whether that's books, videos, or actually getting on and doing the labs yourself. I learn better with videos, so I tend to start a new protocol or technology with a video and then read about it in a book. Using the combination of both and some note taking, I'm able to collaborate my notes together and ensure I hit every single detailed element around that protocol. I also use flashcards to remember silly things that might be important for an exam. So I preempt sort of questions that I feel I may get asked, like writing down IEEE numbers or RFCs to remember. The most important element of the course, and I've already touched base on it, is to keep on track. Most people start strong and end quickly. It's important that you understand it's not a race, it is a difficult exam, and you need to be realistic with yourself and realistic with your timescales. Some days you're not going to study much, some days you're going to study a lot, and one day you may wake up and not understand a particular protocol and the next you do. Don't let a bad day bring you down, because if you have one bad day, you'll start missing and skipping those days, and eventually it will spiral out of control and you'll lose where you are and forget everything you've learned. One thing that helped me was to keep active. If you're studying at all hours of the day and going to work and also maybe working as a networking engineer, all you constantly think about is routing and switching and IPs, and it's very hard to just relax and get things out your mind. I personally do exercise to help me with clearing my mind. However, a lot of people have suggested scented candles or just relaxing music. You've got to make sure that you're keeping your mental health and your body as fit as possible to absorb as much information as you can. As you're getting towards the end of the journey, you need to think about how you can practice. You may have access to test papers, but better, you may even have access to lab equipment to do troubleshooting labs, or have the ability to configure and deploy and troubleshoot some of those technologies that you're not so strong on. Reviewing your notes is key. I keep my notes throughout all of my Cisco journeys and other vendors, and with those notes they actually help me in my day-to-day. I'm able to recall information, and because I wrote those notes, I understand what my mindset was at the time I wrote those notes, and they bring back a lot of memories. I also pull together example configs throughout my studying so I can apply them into production networks. So notes are a key element. The reason notes are also important is because going back to the journey itself, a lot of people get disheartened because they look ahead of how much they've got to do and have no recollection of what they've done already. Having your notes gives you ability of looking back and going, this is how much I've achieved. Actually, I've only got a little bit more to go. So notes are really important. Hopefully, putting that all together, you finish and you pass your exam. I say for now because most people, when they get their first exam, second exam, third exam out of the way, they then get a buzz to continue, and there's still a lot of unanswered questions. Okay, at the CCENT, CCNA and CCNP level, there's a lot of technologies and protocols that change and evolve as you move up through the different levels within the Cisco certification track. So the 3 components for success. First one is to understand that technology. So why does the protocol exist? What problem did it actually solve? So one of the examples may be, why do we have switches now and why don't we use hubs? Why do we have switches and why don't we have bridges? It's about understanding what problem did the switches solve. Why do we use VLANs? Why do we need to actually have different collision domains on a switch and different VLANs to split up that broadcast domain? It's about understanding why they exist and what problem did they solve. Once you understand that basic element, you need to ask yourself, can I configure it? Alright, I understand a VLAN, I understand it breaks up the broadcast domains and a switch breaks up collision domains, but can I configure a VLAN? Do I know how to delete a VLAN? Do I know where the VLAN is stored? It's in the VLAN.dat file. Do I know how to access it? Do I know how to delete that? So it's just asking those sort of questions as you go through it. Lastly, it's about troubleshooting. Once you understand the technology and you can configure it, you then need to understand how you would troubleshoot it. So going back to our VLAN example, what if a VLAN didn't exist? How would you figure that out? What if it did exist but it was the wrong media type? What if it was shut down or suspended? How would you look at the VLAN MAC address table to see if it's learning the MAC addresses correctly, or whether there's the correct ARP cache available because you created an SVI inside that VLAN? It's just about understanding that troubleshooting process. If you understand and you can configure and you can troubleshoot, and you need to really be honest with yourself there, then you can move on to the next technology and so forth. In our next section, I want to talk about the road ahead. As you may or may not know, around the time of this recording, Cisco released the ICND1 version 3, which is now the 100-105 exam number, and the new blueprint has come along with that. Due to this video series is going to be purely based around that, and I just want to give you a highlight of what's going to be going on. First of all, we're going to have a discussion around networking fundamentals, and we're going to ask questions like, what is a firewall, what is a router, and where do they sit in the network, how we would actually cable them together, and the topologies that we'd use. So what is a mesh, what's a hub and spoke, and understanding the difference between the logical and physical elements of those topologies. We'll talk briefly about troubleshooting methods. So actually understanding the mindset of someone that's troubleshooting, how you can use the bottom-up approach or top-down approach and the divide and conquer, and just a brief discussion about what that actually means. We'll then end up looking about the OSI and TCP model, and last but not least move into things like subnetting. Once the networking fundamentals is complete and we're happy with that, we'll move on to LAN switching. In LAN switching, we'll be asking ourselves some questions. What is a switch? Why do we need them? And then once we understand the basic of things like flooding frames and filtering, we'll look about actually configuring some of the core technologies such as VLANs, trunks, access, and then we're going to look about spanning tree protocol, SVIs. Another key bit I want to pick up in this switching is actually something that's not in the blueprint, but I really think it's valuable to understand, and that's the difference between data, control, and essentially management planes. And the reason it's important to understand this is because it heavily involves and heavily dictates your understanding of essentially networking security. All three elements have to be secure in order for your device to actually be considered secure. So what I mean by that is, if you think about the data plane, that's essentially traffic going through the device. So we want to lock down what we do and do not want to go through the device. Control plane, we want to think about traffic going to the actual device itself rather than through it. And management plane, who actually can access the device. So it's important that we just briefly touch on these and the different technologies and methods we can use to lock these down. Once the switching's out of the way and we're happy with that, move on to routing. And again, same questions. We'll start thinking, what is a router? Why is it needed? What does it actually do? What's an AD? So the administrator distance. What's the metric? What's the longest match? And then also, what behavior will a router do? So for example, if a particular route comes in, how would it cipher, looking at this information plus a lot more, what particular interface to send that packet out? And we'll have a discussion around that and the routing decision. Once we understand basics of routing, we'll look at an IGP known as RIP v2 and how that's configured, and router on a stick. So why is router on a stick is needed? What could we use instead of a router on a stick? Once the routing's done, LAN switching and fundamentals, we'll move on to infrastructure services. So things in infrastructure services essentially is, what is DNS? How do we configure it? What's DHCP? Some of you may already know that, but may not know all the three different elements of DHCP and how we would configure them and how they can work completely differently. And then we'll also have a think about NAT and the different ways you can configure NAT. Once we've done the networking infrastructure services, we move on to our last topic, which is infrastructure management. And here we'll go through things like setting up telnet versus SSH, why you would use one over the other, the importance of banners and password recovery. What if you actually get locked out of a device and forget its details? How would you get back into it? Time zones, and follow on to that, something called NTP. Maybe we'll also touch on, if we've got time, how to actually upgrade and downgrade the iOS and prerequisites required, how you can check what features are available for a particular iOS. So Packet Tracer, GNS, and real equipment. There's a lot of debate on these elements and people have different views. I just want to give you my 2 cents on the matter. Packet Tracer, keep in mind this is a simulation, not an emulation. So what I mean by that is you may get some odd behaviors in a packet tracer because it's simulating, not emulating a router. Okay, it does support switching and routing. The most recent versions of packet tracer could most likely do the CCENT and CCNA syllabus, if not a high percentage of it can be done in packet tracer. It doesn't take much resource on your PC. It's a very light file. I think it's like 300 meg or something. The trick with packet tracer is it can be tricky to obtain, meaning it tends to be only available for Cisco partners or people with a Cisco Learner Network. GNS3 is free. You can obtain it on the GNS3 website, which I'll link in the description. The only caveat with that is you have to supply your own Cisco iOS because it emulates the iOS, it doesn't simulate. So the benefit of this is ultimately once it emulates, providing that the iOS is supported, 9 out of 10 times it's going to work fine. You will, when you come into more complex networking scenarios, you will run into oddities with GNS3. I personally have, with mainly around serial links and frame relay, but 9 out of 10 times it's a pretty good system. The thing also with GNS3 is it takes more resource, so you've got to spend a bit more time there to understand how to configure it. Otherwise you're going to have memory issues, and you'll see what I mean once you get going with the platform. Now what I did is I used real equipment. That was the lab that I used back for my CCENT and CCNA. It's a bit over the top. It did take me through my CCNP as well. I ultimately had a bunch of 2600 routers with WIC1T cards, which are the serial links there, which is the black thick cable. I also had at the top a UB, an out-of-bound management, that allowed me to log into the device without any IPs configured, so I can actually get into the console ports of each one, and we'll dive into understanding what console ports are and so forth in a bit. I had a couple of switches. I had 3 switches in total, I think. 2 3550 switches and 1 2950 switch. I personally loved the idea of real equipment. It was great. It gave me something to play with. I understood the upgrading process because I had to upgrade a lot of the iOS, and I also had to update the RAM on some of the devices. But it's a very expensive way of doing it, so you may want to prefer the packet tracer and GNS. The other real thing, the main thing, sorry, I went with the real equipment was because back when I'd done the CCNA, packet tracer and GNS3 wasn't as advanced as they are today. So honestly, you can most likely get away with doing most of it through packet tracer, if not GNS. But if you really are keen to get some hands-on equipment, then I'll link some recommended equipment makes and models in the description for you. So one of the questions I can foresee coming up is, what do I use when I study? I'm here giving you material, but what do I use to get my material? Obviously I use Cisco. What I mean by that is Cisco, as you most likely know, have their own books, the Cisco Press books. They're very good. They're written very well. However, just like any resource out there, if you're using one resource, you're going to come across errors and incomplete information. So it's important that you use multiple sources. Cisco also has an amazing website. If you really know how to navigate that website, you can find config examples, white papers, and command references, and we might spend some time later in the series actually navigating that website and understanding it. That's a really key element to troubleshooting, especially when you're in a real world scenario and you can't figure something out. 9 out of 10 times the answer is going to be somewhere on the Cisco website. I'm a big fan of Cbt Nuggets. Cbt Nuggets, I'm sure most of you would be aware of them, but again, I would link the description. I would link it in the description below. Cbt Nuggets are a primarily networking orientated company. I think it originally started off as that. They have a lot of networking, Microsoft, and so forth, sort of training videos. Highly recommended to get maybe an access pass and to get on there and utilize some of that information. They also have labs and the ability to take videos offline. The one that I use the most is INE, Internet Experts. I primarily use them for the CCIE track. INE are brilliant. Their labs are absolutely amazing. However, a bit pricey. So it depends whether the CCENT or CCNA really warrants the use of INE. I think if you're really planning to go, up to NP-IE level, highly recommend getting access to INE. And last but not least is I use Safari Books. Safari Books, for those who don't know, is an online library. Most, if not all, Cisco Press books are on Safari. Subscription to Safari is paid monthly or annually. Once you log into Safari, you can access all of their books. The beauty of Safari is you can search within books. So if you're learning a particular technology, let's say VTP, and you want to understand how VTP works, or maybe you want to research a particular element of VTP, pop that into the search. Will actually dive into every book for you and pull back the relevant information, rather than having to go to every Cisco related book and dig in there and have a look around. So Safari is really good. So I want to just leave it there for now, because we've talked about the advice and the tips that I want to give you. We talked about the 3 components of success with diagnosing, troubleshooting and configuring. We then looked at the road ahead and what we got coming up in the next couple of videos. We then had a brief discussion around packet tracer, GNS and real equipment, and I'll link some stuff down below in the description. And then we had a discussion around what I use. So INE, Cbt Nuggets, Cisco Press, etc. Again, I'll get some of those links down in the description so you have some reference points there. Any questions or comments, please leave them below. But otherwise, please like and subscribe, and thank you for viewing.